Hello everyone, I'm Tan Zhang and my supervisor is Professor Zhang Yiqiong. We are from Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, China. The topic of our talk today is the same pandemic, different pandemic, COVID-19 in Chinese and American university websites. When we talk about universities' responses to COVID-19 offline, we come across news like these. The American universities require all of their students to get a COVID-19 vaccine before they return to the school. And the Chinese university demand facial recognition and part-time bookings as measures for their reopening. However, when we talk about their responses to COVID-19 online, we may not have so much clues. So I'd like to share my experience of browsing the pandemic sections of two universities. The first one is my university, Guangdong University of Foreign Studies, and the another is University of Leeds, our partner university. And I'd like to show my the pandemic section of these two universities. The first one is the pandemic section of Guangdong University of Foreign Studies. As we can see, the navigation soon summarizes all of the information here, and it includes 6 categories. The first one is homepage, and the second one is deployment, which is mainly about the measures taken by the university to fight against the pandemic. And the info page is mainly about the resources provided by the university to their faculty and their students. While the authoritative notices is mainly about the notices and policies published by the authoritative institutions, such as the government and official media. The updates is mainly about the spread and other kinds of information about the pandemic. And knowledge is about the scientific promotion of the knowledges and skills that are relevant to fighting against the pandemic. The content below are just similar as what the navigation soon tells us. The situation of the University of Leeds is totally different. We can see that the navigation soon is divided into 7 categories. The first one is homepage, and the second and third one are individual advices, such as the student and postgraduate research advice and staff advice. The fourth one is reporting you have COVID-19. It means the syndromes after contracting the virus and the measures you must take to counteract the COVID-19 virus. And these 2 subsections are about the resources available and the updates on the pandemic and the services provided by the campus. And the last one is the content information. Below are the future-oriented contents like the booking, arrangements, and all kinds of planning. And this is the resources for the students and staff and the contribution of the university. Now come back to our findings. We summarize our analysis here. While the Guangdong University of Foreign Studies adopts a collective perspective, introducing the deployment of the university and the news of the whole city and province. It also adopts an authoritative position, introducing authoritative notices. And the events in their pandemic section is mainly about past events, like the updates in May 8 and 9-10. However, the University of Leeds is totally different. It adopts an individual perspective, providing information like students learning online and staff teaching online. It also adopts an egalitarian perspective, like advice for student and postgraduate research and staff advice, rather than posting the notices and policies that you must follow. And also, it adopts a future-oriented perspective, introducing all kinds of future-oriented information, such as the booking, the planning, and all other kinds of future-oriented events. All of our findings are part of the project of pandemic, whose purpose is to observe, record, share, and reflect on the changes to communication and interaction caused by the by the COVID-19 crisis, and our focus will mainly put on the institutional communication of university. Now, what we have known about institutional communication in COVID-19 includes how medical staff communicate with their patients and how institutions counteract the misleading information. Or they talk about in a broader settings, like how the governments use social media to promote citizen engagement, or how they use Twitter to declare decisions, consult citizens, and run campaigns. Yet, universities all over the world have played a significant role in containing the spread of COVID-19. Little is known, however, about how the university communicate with their audience online. So we propose our two research questions as follows. The first one is, what functions do pandemic section pages play in the university website? And the second one is, what kind of social and institutional practices are presented in the pandemic section of the university websites? We first collected our data. They consist of the pandemic section of the top 10 universities in China and America, according to the QS World University Ranking in 2020. The data is collected on May 30, 2020 with Scrapbook, a Firefox add-on. And it should be noted that 3 of the Chinese universities don't have a pandemic section, while all of the American universities have a pandemic section of their own. As for the analysis, we adopt the framework for web page analysis proposed by Djonov Knox in 2014, which adopts a functional approach. That means it focuses on the 3 meta functions of the website. The first is ideational. It's mainly about what content is included or excluded and how are they classified. And the second one is interpersonal. It's mainly about the interpersonal relationship constructed in the web page. And the third one is textual. It's mainly about the composition. So first of all, we'd like to focus on the purpose of the pandemic section. So why they set the pandemic section? We first look at this research question by looking into the media agenda covered by the articles in the pandemic section. The media agendas are as follows. First is updates about the spread of the pandemic. The second is the control of the pandemic, introducing the policies and regulations by the government and communities. The impact of pandemic includes the community's life and work that are influenced by the pandemic. And popularization of science on the virus means the scientific knowledge on the pandemic. While dedication in fighting against the pandemic means the promotion of professionalism and sacrifice, while others covers other sets of agenda. Here's our examples. Like we have mentioned just now, the spread is about the spread of the COVID-19, such as the COVID-19 in Hubei province on May 29. And control is about the measures taken by the community and the government, such as the notices on anti-contagion plans in college and universities. While impact is about how the COVID-19 virus affects our life and our work. Like will convocation ceremonies still take place? And here's the examples of popularization, dedication, and other media agenda. The results are as follows. As we can see, both of the Chinese and American corpus have similar proportion of articles about control and impact of the pandemic, while the Chinese one have more dedication articles, introducing the professionalism and sacrifice of their medical staff, while the American one has more about the popularization of the scientific knowledge on the pandemic. So one side is more promotion and the other side is education. Next, we will focus on the pandemic fighting in the pandemic section pages from 3 perspectives. The first one is collective versus individual. We first look at the navigation contents. The Chinese pandemic section, all of them have sections introducing the policies and deployment of the universities, while none of them have specialized sections for staff and students. So it is about the collective information, like the central deployment, the deployment in meeting, and the decision deployment. While the American one, 70% of them have categorized the resource or information pages by the identities of viewers, offering individualized services, such as in the MIT pandemic section, it has information for undergraduate students, graduate students, and faculty and researchers. So it is offering individualized services. Next, we conduct a social actor analysis. We coded the visual images by the social actors represented in the images. For example, in this image, it shows our president inspecting a laboratory in Tsinghua University with the students and staff around. So it is coded as government officials and staff and students. While this image is mainly about the medical staff, so it is termed as medical staff in our coding. This image is about a teacher preparing for his lessons. So it is termed as staff or students. Other kinds of social actors are termed as unidentifiable in our coding. The results are as follows. While the Chinese corpus mainly presents their social actors in a group as a collective entity, the American one are more likely to present their social actors in singles as individuals. To be more exact, the Chinese corpus and the American corpus have similar proportion of representing their social actors as staff and students, but the Chinese one have more government administrators and medical staff represented in the images, while the American one has more unidentifiable ones, which mainly represented in the stock images, whose purpose is mainly to represent the reality and to evoke some kind of emotion or attitudes, which is very individual oriented. And next, we will focus on the personal pronouns. We recorded the frequency of pronouns in the two corpora per 1,000 words. You can see that both of the corpora have similar frequency in the usage of first personal singular, like I and mine, while the American corpus has most of their personal pronouns as second person singular and plural, addressing the audience directly as an individual, like you, your, and yourself. While the Chinese one are more likely to adopt the first personal plural in their pronoun usage, like we and everybody, addressing the audience and the producer as a collective entity. The examples are as follows. Like this shows, fighting against the pandemic, we are unified, and the pandemic will eventually be gone with our joint effort. So it emphasizes a collective perspective, while the US one are more likely to address the audience as an individual. Like if you are tested for coronavirus, and no matter where you are tested, and like avoid touching your eyes, it is individual oriented. Next, we'll focus on authoritative versus egalitarian. We'll first look at the modal verbs. According to Halliday and Macpherson, the modal verbs can be divided into two categories: modalization, which is subcategorized into probability and usuality. One is maybe, and another is sometimes. And another category is the modulation, which is subcategorized into obligation, what one is wanted to do, and inclination, what one wants to do. The results are as follows. While the Chinese corpus has more modulation modal verbs, and especially the obligation one, telling what one's obligation is or are, and the American university have more modalization modal verbs, telling the prediction of the probability of something, of the events. So it is about planning and schema. But what does it concerns about authoritative and egalitarian? The Chinese one has more modulations, They motivate the audience to follow instruction or to devote in anti-contagion efforts, such as the example shows. The director of the Department of Higher Education, Wu Yan, said, "We should accelerate the transition." So it is the policy imposed on the individuals. While the American one have more modalizations, their function is to offer information, like patients will be checked in by. So it is information providing, rather than telling you what to do. And last, we'll focus on the past and future perspective covered by the tenses in courses. We recorded the 3 tenses, past tense, present tense, and future tense in the courses. The examples are as follows. And the results are summarized in this table. While both of the corpus have many uses, many frequency of present tense in the courses, the Chinese one have more past tense in the courses than the American one, while the American one has more future-oriented tenses. The Chinese one. So the Chinese pandemic section is mainly introduced the efforts taken by the efforts of the university to fight against the pandemic, while the American one is mainly about the planning, which is future-oriented. And this table summarizes our findings. From the perspective of function, the Chinese pandemic section is mainly to promote collective with values and obedience of cooperative citizenry for fighting against the pandemic. While the US one, quite on the contrary, they mainly tries to disseminate anti-contagious knowledge and offering guidance on personal or public hygiene practices. From the perspective of ideational perspective, the Chinese pandemic section is mainly to present the stories about dedication, and the events are mainly past-oriented, while the US one mainly presents the infos and updates of the pandemic, which are future-oriented. And the China, in the personal perspective, they construct an authoritative image of themselves, expecting the audience to obey, while the US counterparts suggest their audience on an equal footing, expecting to be persuaded. And here's our references. Thank you for listening.